Today's lesson is Chapter 3, Lesson 11, on pages 221 through 226. Our objective is I can interpret the remainder in a division problem. Question 1. In this lesson, you learn to interpret the remainder of a division word problem by relating the remainder to the blank. Question 2. Mr. Wolf has 13 cookies and 4 friends. He wants to give each of his friends the same amount of cookies. How many cookies does each of his friends get? What did you do with the remainder? Okay, so let's watch a video about this.
Mathematicians, in this lesson, you're going to learn to interpret a remainder in a division word problem by relating the remainder to the problem. You know that division is separating a group into parts. Sometimes these parts are equal, but other times we will have a remainder. So if we're looking at this problem, we see that we have a group of 7 pencils. I want to divide this group into 2 separate parts by sharing my pencils with 2 friends. So if I see this, I can now move and share my pencils with my friends so that each friend gets 3 pencils. I don't want to give one friend an extra pencil. I want my groups to be equal. So when I look at the problem, I can see that 7 divided by 2 is equal to 3 with a remainder of 1 because each friend got 3 pencils and there's 1 pencil remaining. A remainder is a leftover amount that cannot be separated equally into one of the parts. I'm going to explain this idea by showing you a word problem. In this problem, Amber baked 25 cookies. She wants to share the cookies evenly among 4 friends. How many cookies will each friend receive? We know that if we divide 24 into 4 equal groups, we will have 1 cookie remaining. So in this picture, each one of my friends has 6 cookies. But we have 1 cookie in the middle that's still left over, or it's a remainder. It's important to understand that the remainder of 1 is related back to the word problem. Sometimes we will need to ignore the remainder, and other times we may need to round up based on the problem. In this example, we can just ignore the extra cookie. We've done everything the problem asks. Each friend has an even amount of cookies. Let's see how this works in a problem. The students at Johnson Elementary School are taking a field trip to the zoo. There are 52 students going on the trip, and each bus can carry 7 students to the zoo. How many buses does the principal need to reserve to make sure each student has a seat? So there's lots of important information in this problem. One thing that's really important is that I want to make sure each student has a seat. So we don't want to have any students left over that can't go on the field trip with us. I also know that we have 52 students and each bus carries 7. So I'm going to be breaking up my group of 52 students into parts with 7 students in each part or in each bus to get my answer. Our answer should tell us how many buses we need in order to get everyone to the zoo. So if I look at this picture, I can see that if I divide and I have 7 students in each bus, that's a total of 49 students because 52 divided by 7 is 7 remainder 3. If we look at this, we're only taking 49 students if we take 7 buses. So we actually have 3 students remaining. Thinking back to our problem, we don't want to have any students remaining. The problem asks us to make sure that each student has a seat on the bus. So I know that 7 buses is not going to be enough. I need to round up my remainder, so thinking about 52 divided by 7 equals 7 remainder 3. This remainder needs to be rounded up. I'm going to need to take an extra bus in order to be able to get our remaining 3 students on that bus. So in this case, the answer to our problem would be that we need 8 buses. Remember, it's important to think about remainders in the context of the problem. In this example, it is important to pay attention to the remainder so that we don't leave students behind. In the example previously, we could ignore the remainder because it was only a leftover cookie. We had done what the question had asked us to do, and we had split the cookies evenly among 4 friends. The remainder wasn't meaningful. In this lesson, you learned to interpret the remainder of a division word problem by relating the remainder to the problem.
Okay, so if you look at this in your book, this gives you, in the beginning, it gives you a lot of hands-on examples that you can try out. But I'm going to talk about the homework helper on page 225. So in the homework helper, it's talking about there's a total of 47 students signed up to play soccer. There's 4 teams. So how many students are on a team, on each team? So I know that in this problem, I'm going to do 47 divided by 4. So in this example, it's saying you could use cubes to represent a student and plates to represent the teams. So if you divided them out, so you have 4 as your divisor. Let's say these are my teams. I just make circles. 1, 2, 3, 4 teams. And then I just went through, and you guys know this strategy of putting the students into each team. So I'm not going to do the whole 47, but let's say I went through and I put each student in a team. Here's 1, 2, and so on. Then we would figure out that there were 11 on each team, but there was 3 left over. So this is where you have to think about what that remainder means. That 3 left over, that means 3 students don't get to be on a team. So what do we do with that? So we have to interpret the remainder. There are 4 teams of 11 students, and there are 3 students who are left over that will be placed on teams. So what could you do with that realistically? Well, we can't just make another team of 3 kids. That wouldn't really work. So in this case, we have to think about it logically and think, well, we could just have 3 teams that have 12 students and 1 team will have 11, because that would be pretty fair. So that's why you always have to think about the remainder in terms of the question, because it could be different for each question. Okay, so look back at questions 1 and 2, and remember, question 1, we talked about that. I just talked about that at the end of this last part when I was talking about the homework helper, and it was in the video clip we watched. And then solve question 2, and remember, what you do with that remainder should be realistic in the case of this problem.